let's start off with Georgia, okay? Because Georgia's coming off a loss to Notre Dame. Carson Beck goes down in the SEC championship game. I'm sure it's a little bit of a deflating season for them. They've been up and down, up and down. They win the SEC, but they go up against Notre Dame in New Orleans. A lot of adversity struck their team in New Orleans, whether it be the attack or Kirby's dad passing and or just being overall a QB, not taking anything away from Notre Dame, but specifically talking about Georgia. What do you think that Georgia's got to do to get back to the dominance that they've had over the last couple of years?
Well, the easiest thing to identify is their offensive inconsistencies, and the biggest thing for their offensive inconsistency has been them having issues running the football. And that is a really complex problem for them. It's not just, hey, they don't have the running backs. It's the running back production hasn't been there. They were a little bit banged up throughout the season with Trevor Etienne's availability. Their offensive line, the interior guys, were also banged up and inconsistently available. And when they were on the field, they also weren't playing at a high enough level. The largest thing that I'm focused on is they have to find a run game in the offseason. And this is such an elaborate problem that is fixable. It's fixable for any football team. There are going to be a lot of new faces on their offensive line. And there are two directions that can swing. It either swings in the direction of they take a step backward, having to play some younger players and inexperienced players, or they take a huge step forward because guys with a lot of potential are taking over for players that were struggling. I don't know who those guys are exactly because there's a mixed match of opportunities. Does Dylan Fairchild and do Tate Radledge? Tate Radledge is going to go to the NFL because he's a redshirt senior, but does Dylan Fairchild, does he declare, is he going to be a part of this upcoming class? Finding a running game is extremely, extremely critical. They had some bright spots with Nate Frazier, but who's that next backup? Assuming Trevor Etienne goes on in the NFL, who is that next running back that's going to be contributing behind him? I feel like that there is a lot of potential, Blake, for Gunnar Stockton to take a step forward based on the little glimpses that we saw in the small sample size of those two games, that there's a lot of potential for him to be that Stetson Bennett type quarterback, to be that guy that lives and breathes the program because he's from the area. He just knows the vibe and the energy that he needs to bring to Athens. All that's there. Those boxes are checked, and they just got a premier receiver that we hyped up yesterday in Zachariah Branch. But it all comes down to their run game because it feels like everything else, I can assume their defense is going to be great. I can assume that passing attack is going to be there and be a bit more improved. It all comes down to the one thing that we talked about a ton this year, which was running the football.
Well, not only that, to add on to that, Noah Thomas seems to be trending towards Georgia, the Texas A&M wide receiver. We'll see. I don't know if you're rewatching this on video and he commits somewhere else. It just seems at the moment he's trending per 247. You go and get Zachariah Branch. So you've gone and gotten receivers. Joe, here's the thing that nobody wants to really talk about. We talk about the interceptions from Carson Beck. We talk about some of the inconsistencies on their offensive line and run game. You're right. Joe, they led the SEC in drops. Like, it's not just running the football. Even when they were having explosive plays, they would get dropped. Like, look at the game against Notre Dame. Like, Dylan, the person that was most excited about the touchdown that Cash had on the wheel route was Dylan Bell. Like, I mean, you have a hybrid tight end out on the boundary trying to, like, what are you doing? So they went out and got receivers. You're right about what's going on along their offensive line, though. Joe, I don't know if it's really that fixable. Because you're going from that much of experience to inexperience. You didn't go in the portal and get anybody. Either, number one, you have to hope and pray that you developed at a really high level, and maybe they have. Look, man, Georgia's number one, number two in the recruiting in 23, 24, 25. I think they were third or fourth this year for what it's worth. They've always recruited well along the offensive line. How do they develop there is going to be a big deal. They cannot have offensive success without being able to run in between the tackles. They can't. It's how they won a national title in 22. Quite frankly, it's how they won a title in 23. It will be very interesting to see how all of this takes place. Now, they have been beat up by the injury bug a lot the last 2 seasons. A lot. I don't know what's going on there. Something's got to change. They're more beat up than any team in the country, Joe. Look, you had both guards that were out at times. You had a center that you had to replace. You had a tackle that you had to – Xavier Truss comes out of the Notre Dame game. They were beat up this year, and they've been beat up. The question ultimately becomes, do you need to go stylistically different? And is Gunnar Stockton your guy? Is it going to be Puglisi? I don't know. They gotta take a deep look at a lot of things that they've done. And number one is probably the running game, but drops at wide receivers got to be a big deal. I'm not worried about them defensively. Never will.
Right. They're always going to figure it out. If their defense is bad, something's freaking wrong.
Well,
there's a real problem happening.
Joe, they lost both. There were moments in times this season they lost both of their best defensive linemen and still wouldn't allow points. That's how, bro. C.J. Allen came in last year based off of an injury and didn't come off the field. That's how deep they are, and defensively. Offensively, they have had issues, and that's going to continue to be their issue.
Before we move on to the next team, I think the way that you framed something with how they used to run the football and in how it really was the catalyst for their offensive success. I would even go as simpler of what I described and what we're both describing. They need to get back to what used to work. They need to hit the reset button, and they need to look back at what was their identity that got them to this point offensively. And it was running the football. It was building the offense off of running the football. In Carson Beck's first year as a starter last year, and when he played tremendously versus this past year where I brought up the point where it felt like he was playing hero ball and that Mike Bobo was trying to turn him into this first round pick that, he's a great player or was a great player, but was asking him to do too much. Get back to the basics of what made this team great. And I think that with Gunnar Stockton, there's more of a possibility of that. And maybe there's going to be less being inside their head on how they're game planning and how they're approaching attacking opponents. I'd be curious to know who's the leading back. Does Nate Frazier take a huge step forward being a freshman this year? And does that offensive line get figured out? But they got to keep running the damn ball.
Well, I got to be real with you. There's an NFL GM. You know that my relationship to him. I'll just say this. He was texting me during that entire game, begging and pleading for Nate Frazier, who was the one that was running the ball the most effectively to be in that game. The kid's a baller. He had the most success because he puts his head down and he runs you over. I felt like Etienne was a little worried about getting hit. Look, the fumble was a big deal. He got hit in those ribs again, which he had fractured early in the season.
No, it did.
Excuse me.
Frazier showed a lot of good things, though, for being a freshman.
He's got to stop fumbling the football, and I think he'll figure